Okay, let's continue our coverage of the RSS file format by taking a look at some of the optional elements of the channel tag. Now, this is not an exhaustive list. If you want to see every single tag that the channel can possibly contain, I urge you to refer to the specification at the URL I provided earlier. These are just a selection of some of the more important tags that you should know about. So the language tag, starting right here at the top, indicates the language that the feed is written in. And this is written using the W3C style language indicators. So, for example, EN-US indicates English in the United States. And you can look up a whole bunch of these language codes on the W3C's website. The generator tag indicates the software package that created the feed. And in this case, I've got an example here called My RSS Package 2.0, but if you edit it by hand, you can also just simply include the string by hand. The image tag specifies an image that can be displayed with the channel, and there are typical constraints on the size that this image can be, and I'll let you refer to the spec for that. It's not very big. It's typically like 140 pixels high by 80 pixels wide or something like that. The copyright tag is the copyright notice for the channel content. So if you want your information to be copyrighted, you can put a copyright notice in using this tag. The publication date for the channel content is indicated by the pub date field. Now, this is a date field that indicates what date that the publication happens on. So, for example, if you publish this every day, then this date would flip every 24 hours. The category tag indicates the category for the news, and you can use as many category tags as you want. So here I've got one example for news, but if you had a channel that fit into more than one category, you can use as many of these category tags as you feel adequately describes the categories your feed fits into. Then there's the last build date. The last build date is different from the pub date. This is the last time that the channel content changed. So you may publish on a regular schedule, and the content may change on a different schedule. So they don't necessarily need to be the same thing. And the last tag I'm going to point out, which is optional for the channel, is the rating tag, which is the rating for the channel. And this conforms to the PICS standard, which is specified by the W3C, and it's described at this URL right here. So if you want to learn more about that, you can investigate that URL. Okay, the item tag also has optional elements. The author, right there at the top, that indicates the person who wrote this particular item, and it's the email address of the author. So, for example, each individual item can have a separate author. This is what the content would look like. In this case, it's joe@joe.com. The category indicates the category for this item. So just as you can have categories for the channel tag, you can also have categories for an individual item. And again, you can use more than one here. The pub date is the publication date for this particular item. So this is the date at which time this particular piece of information was published and added to the feed. The next field is interesting. It's called GUID. A GUID means a globally unique identifier, and it's an identifier that's unique for this item. There are no rules for the format of GUIDs. You can use any one of a number of schemes, though they usually take the form of URIs or URLs. If they have an optional attribute named isPermalink equals true, then the blog reader, or the feed reader to be more specific, can assume that the GUID can be used to open a link to the item in the browser. And then finally, there's the enclosure optional element, which describes a media object that is attached to the item. This is how podcasting is achieved. There are 3 required attributes if you're going to use the enclosure. There's a URL attribute, which indicates where the item is located on the internet. And you can see I've got an example over here. So for example, if I was creating a podcast and I was creating MP3 files, for each item, I would use an enclosure tag, which specified the URL to the MP3 file. There's the length, which is the size of the item in bytes. So I've got that here. And then the MIME type of the item, which in this case would be audio MPEG, but it could be anything else based upon what the content of the information is. Might be some other audio file format or video or what have you. Okay, so now let's go back and take a look at our RSS sample feed, because now we have much richer information that we can include in the feed format. So here we have the RSS and channel tags that we started out with, and the title, link, and description, which are the required parts of the channel definition. Although now we've also added the optional language, here specified as US English, and the generator I put in is by hand because I don't have a software package that made this one, and the publication date. The publication date was Wednesday, 5th of March, 2009 at 2 a.m. And so far, this feed only has one item in it, and again, we've added some more rich information here. Rather than just the title, link, and description, there's also a pub date, an author, and a GUID, which happens to be a permalink. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about including HTML content in RSS feeds. There's a couple of ways that you can achieve doing this. I'm going to talk about the two most common. Now, as I said earlier, the RSS specification for RSS 2.0 allows HTML to be included in the description tags of items and channels. In order to make this work, however, you can't just simply shove HTML code with all of its angle brackets and everything inside the RSS file. You have to encode the HTML before you put it in. Now, the first way of doing this is encoding the HTML tags by doing what's known as escaping. And you can see here that I've got the entity encoding for the less than sign, and then a bold, and then a greater than sign. And over here, I've got another bold tag. If you looked at this in HTML, this ampersand LT semicolon would be a left angle bracket like it is on the description right here. And then this ampersand GT semicolon would be the greater than angle bracket. So I've entity encoded the HTML here and included it in the description tag. The other way to do it is to leave the HTML just as it is, but put it within what's known as a C data section. C data sections are standard parts of XML, and they're declared by using an angle bracket with an exclamation point, a bracket, the word C data, and then another opening bracket. And then you can just put your HTML code right here inside the C data section, and then close it off by two brackets and an angle bracket. The C data section basically tells the XML parser that's reading the XML feed, don't worry about what's in here. It's character data. You don't have to worry about parsing it. You can just skip over it for the purposes of trying to find tags. Okay, well now we know enough to create our own RSS feeds. Let's move on now and take a look at our next real-world XML file format, which is the Atom file format.